When the caseworker said that she was taking my kids screamed and ran over and were clinging to me, and we were crying, and I was begging her, and she wouldn't. And she said if I didn't give them my kids right now, she was going to have that police officer arrest me.
From Acapulco, Mexico, this is Anarchast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. And I have another great first-time guest coming on. There's so many. And she's actually going to be speaking at Anarchapulco 2020. Her name is Nova Ohm. And she actually, I don't know the full story. I'm going to hear about it along with you. But I know that Child Protection Services, or whatever they call themselves, Child Pedophile Services, probably closer to the truth, stole her kids at some point. And she actually ended up suing them and actually won a fairly large amount suing CPS. I've had on Carlos Morales in the past, who's a Child Protective Services whistleblower. So we've talked about CPS quite a bit in the past, and it's a totally heinous sort of a government organization as far as I can tell. We're going to ask Nova, though, all her experiences with it. So we'll get into all of that. And of course, there's so many things going on with, like, they're trying to vaccinate all the kids in the government schools now, and if you don't vaccinate, then the CPS shows, like, it's getting crazy there in the U.S. So she's coming in from Austin, Texas. And Nova, pleasure to have you on. And the first question I have to ask you is, how did you become an anarchist?
Yeah. So I guess I would say that it happened through the CPS situation. I never really considered myself a rebel. I just kind of was always flowing and doing my thing. Even though a lot of the things that I did were very subversive, but it was never from that intention. And through this situation with CPS, I really understood how deeply flawed the government having authority over people's lives was.
Yeah, absolutely. Most people watching this show understand that. So let's get into what happened with you. Tell us the whole story.
Yeah. So my kids and I lived a very alternative lifestyle. We lived on the road, traveling. We had this amazing bliss life. Called it simple abundance. It was just absolutely incredible. My youngest daughter ended up getting sick with, we thought it was a flu. We took her to a doctor that said that she should be rushed to the emergency room. So we took her to the emergency room, and she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and was in what they call diabetic ketoacidosis, so DKA for short. So her body was septic from too much glucose in her system. And about 71 to 77, I can't remember which one it is, 71 or 77% of children, parents, families learn about their child having type 1 diabetes through that. So that wasn't uncommon. But our lifestyle was, and the hospital social worker called CPS on us, and they got involved in our lives. And
Did they call CPS just because you have somewhat of a different lifestyle?
I'm assuming that's what it was. I didn't hear specifically what it was. Okay. They never told us why they called. Okay. But the allegations were that our life was unsafe for my youngest daughter. So they came in and asked a bunch of questions and whatnot, and we seemed to navigate it pretty well. It's kind of a long story with a lot of stuff that I'm going to skip over. But basically their caseworker kept missing appointments, so we never ended up with a case plan. And our family was free to leave the county and go somewhere else. So we left and went down to San Diego and stayed with my mom for a little while, trying to find a house, because that's what CPS had told us we needed. And so we went down there, tried to find a house, ended up at one point back in that same county that we've been at visiting my friend. And CPS showed up at the door with 2 extra workers and a sheriff. And they ended up taking my kids from me.
Wow. Let me just ask you, like, what kind of lifestyle were you living that they could have construed as somehow being harmful to the kid?
Yeah. Living on the road was the main thing. They actually didn't have, there was instability was what they were claiming. But the issue was that we had not only my doctors that had no issue with our life, even though at that time we weren't technically living on the road. The caseworker said, well, she lied in court, which was how she kept my kids. When she took my kids, she took my youngest daughter to the hospital to get checked out. And the hospital told her that there was nothing wrong with her and she could go home immediately. And the caseworker told them that she needed my daughter to stay there. My daughter was 4 at the time, that she needed her to stay there until they could get a foster home set up for my daughter. And so my daughter spent 6 days at the hospital alone without anybody there with her. It's still really emotional.
Yeah, I'll bet. Unbelievable so far, the story. Just, like, when you say you're living on the road, like, do you mean like you're homeless, or are you living in your vehicle, or how are you?
Yeah. We started off in an RV, and we ended up, when I was a kid, I traveled with my family in our minivan. My mom had a job that traveled, so we'd take off cross country. So when I decided to live on the road with my kids, we started off in an RV, but it just wasn't the simplicity and the ease that we wanted. So we downsized to our minivan, and we made a bed.
So you're living in a van, like thousands of Google employees, and there's actually a fairly major movement of people who've started just living in their vehicles, and a lot of people really love it, and I can totally understand why. I call myself a perpetual traveler as it is. Of course, I've got a family, and I'm a lot in Mexico now, but I used to live on my sailboat. How is that any different than living in your van? Of course, if you tell people you live on your boat, they think, oh, you're rich and you live a great life. You're living in your van, and they actually basically kidnapped your kid because of it. That's unbelievable.
Yeah. So the caseworker, kept my daughter in that hospital for 6 days, and then presented to the court that my daughter was in a fragile medical condition and had to be at the hospital. So that's why the court kept my daughter, because they were under the impression, based on the CPS workers' assessment of my daughter's health, that my daughter was in some kind of medical condition due to her type 1 diabetes and my negligent care. And so that is why the judge kept my kids. And so when they first took my kids, I knew that it was medical, and everybody kept saying that I should call the HSLDA. But I was like, but they're the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, for anybody that doesn't know what that is. And I was like, but they're a homeschool organization. And over, time, the next couple days, calling CPS and trying to find out why they took my kids, because they wouldn't tell me what the reason was. Which there's so many things that they did that were illegal. But anyway, so one of the things they mentioned was homeschooling. So I called the HSLDA and I explained our situation, and they sent a lawyer to come fight for us. And the HSLDA was the organization that actually represented us, both in getting my kids returned to me and also our lawsuit. And they really, really fought for us. Without them, we would not have had the same story. Too many public defenders, they work with these people every day, and they're not willing to fight them. And so we were very blessed to have the HSLDA fight for us. They came in, it took 30 days to get my son back, and it took 70 days to get my daughter back, my youngest daughter.
Wow. I've never heard of this Homeschool Legal Defense Association, or whatever it's called, but it's kind of interesting that the homeschoolers need legal defense. That's the natural sort of state of affairs for most of human history. Is you have your kids, you raise them in your house, you teach them how to farm, you teach them how to do this. Now, in the U.S., if you do that, you might get in some trouble, and so much to the point you have this like legal defense fund to try to help homeschoolers. That's unbelievable on its own.
Yeah. It's such a funny world we're living in up here. So the HSLDA represented us. They also, the lawyer specifically that represented us is a part of an organization called parental.org. I don't know if you're familiar with that one, but they represent more than just homeschoolers, but it's the same kind of thing, that parents deserve the right to raise their children in the way that they want to raise them, and the government should be involved. So they're a really amazing organization. They were incredible advocates for us. They fought for us really well, and they got my kids returned to me. What they ended up doing was getting a signed affidavit from my daughter's endocrinologist saying that my daughter's care was very well taken care of, that they were impressed with my care and things like that. And then CPS realized they didn't have a case against us, and they returned my daughter to me, and we walked away.
Wow. So they had one of your kids for, I think you said 30 days, the other for 90 days. Is that right? So where were they during this period when they're not with their mom, which is who they should be with? Where were they?
So my children were not only separated from me, but they were separated from each other. My younger two children were.
They must have been felt so scared.
Yeah. My youngest daughter, she was 4 at the time. My son was 7. He just turned 7. My youngest daughter, because of her type 1 diabetes, she had to go to a special foster care that could handle medical needs like that. And they couldn't have my son there because they couldn't take up a spot in that house for a child that didn't have medical needs. So my children, who we had always co-slept, we'd spent every moment together from their birth. We homeschooled, we did everything together.
Sounds perfect. That's how most people should be doing it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And we've recovered that life for the most part. Very much so, if not more. But yeah, it was the absolute life. And, it was crazy. Everywhere we'd go, we'd talk to people about our life. You'd be like, oh, do you live here? Are you visiting? We'd always end up talking to people and sharing our life, and they'd see my kids and they're like, wow, you guys are amazing. You're doing a great job. Like, strangers everywhere we went would say these things. And the fact that CPS could not see it, they were, blind or were looking for, to see certain things.
Yeah, I can't say in this individual case, but in many cases, whether it's the police or CPS, a lot of the most evil people gravitate to these places. And with the police, a lot of them are kind of Satanists. They like doing evil things to people. And if you're going to do that, where's a good place? Go to a place where they give you a shiny badge and you can do pretty much anything you want to people. And CPS, if you're really a pedophile or something like that, where are you going to go? You're going to go to a place like that. And hopefully nothing like that happened to your kids. Probably didn't happen, but that definitely can happen. And of course, if you are that kind of person, you're probably going to sign up to be a foster parent or stuff like that. Not saying that all foster parents are bad. I'm sure there's millions of great ones, but bad people are going to gravitate to that thing. And then secondly, or thirdly, when you give anyone some power, right, a lot of people really gravitate to that, who really want that power. So you probably have these women or men, and they have no power in their real lives because they're idiots and they can't do anything and no one likes them. So they go to these sort of things. They're like, oh, well, now I get to decide and no one can come back at me. I can just say, oh, I don't like how you're raising your kid. I'm going to have them stolen. The whole system is atrocious from the get-go. And really, it's so funny, the government, people who listen to the news and that sort of stuff, they're like, well, these government agencies are there to help people. Well, it's possible sometimes it does help people. I'm sure that by accident it happens every now and then. For the most part, for everything I've seen, it's rarely ever helping people. And in fact, in your particular case, incredibly hurting yourself and your family for quite a length of time. Yeah.
Well, so this CPS worker, when I very first met her at a team decision meeting that we had right after my daughter was diagnosed, she came up to me and she said, this case is very personal to me because I have type 2 diabetes and I know how important this is. And I knew in that moment that she either was going to be a very strong advocate for us or she was going to be a very big problem for us. And she did end up being a big problem for us. When she came back and, with the sheriff and she checked my daughter's glucometer and she saw my daughter's numbers, she didn't know what she was looking at because she has type 2 diabetes and she assumed it was the same for type 1 and she thought my daughter's numbers were too varied, that they fluctuated too much. But that's the nature of type 1 diabetes. And she would not listen to me, and she took my kids and took them to the hospital, and the hospital was like, yeah, there's nothing wrong. In fact, when they first took my daughter to the hospital, the doctor that was on staff there was the doctor that had seen us when my daughter was diagnosed, and she knew us really well. We'd gone back and seen her at that hospital even after my daughter was released. And when they first brought my daughter in, the doctor came in and she's like, why is this little girl here? I know her. She's not neglected. I know her mom. There's no neglect going on here. And CPS found another doctor to take care of my daughter.
Wow. Yeah. The other thing go ahead.
Yeah. It's just it's just riddled. The whole system is just riddled with these ways that, like you said, where CPS has all this power, all this authority. They showed up at court with their document about my parenting. It was like 30 pages long, which is, by the way, insane for those kind of documents. They're usually about 5 pages long. Hers was over 30 pages about what a horrible person I was.
Wow.
And the courts, at the first court date, all they do is review CPS's documents and decide whether or not to keep the children based on that information. The parents don't even get a chance to talk.
Really?
It's a month before the parents get a chance to defend themselves.
That's truly unbelievable. Yeah, the other thing I was going to bring up is when you have government organizations, they're not like private organizations, right? A private company needs to make money, so it's going to do things profitably, and they're going to be as good as they can. They're going to hire the best people, because if they're not doing a good job, they're going to lose money. Government is the exact opposite. So you have these people who the only way that they can really justify their jobs. So if that person was sitting there all week and no one came in, and no kid came in with like a black eye and said, get me out of my family or something, they have to go out looking for problems and creating problems, or else they're going to lose their job. So it's a typical government sort of like communist style, non-private sort of incentives. All the incentives of the free market get flipped upside down when it comes to government, and government organizations want to just keep getting bigger and bigger and finding more problems and creating problems. And you saw all of that firsthand.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so much, conspiracy type of, I'm going to say conspiracy type of understandings of why CPS works. And that in that county specifically, there was a very large number of Black families that were being, that CPS was getting involved with, to the fact that they were creating a class action suit against CPS for targeting Black families. My children are half Black. There's also things about, CPS when they place children in families, if they're able to adopt them, I think it is when they adopt them, that they get extra money, or they get money. And if a child has an illness, a medical need of some sort, they get extra money. And my children were so well-adjusted and smart and interesting. And I feel like maybe we were just an easy target for CPS. They were like, oh, we've got these kids, this one with the medical needs, they're great kids, they're smart, they're funny, they're well-adjusted, and their mom, we can make their mom look really bad. Let's just, I feel like we were just an easy target. And the area that we were at, like we mostly, when we traveled, we spent time in hippie areas, people that got us, but we were visiting my friend who lived in an area that there was a lot of drugs, there was a lot of poverty, things like that. And I think CPS just didn't know what to do with us. They were like, who are these people? I don't understand.
Wow. Yeah. And so you went on to take them to court, and I've actually had on recently a few people. I had on Bruce Bauman, who took the Federal Reserve to court and won. And I'm actually not a big fan of going to courts, especially for suing people or anything like that, especially government courts, right? But the one thing that I don't mind at all is if you take the government to court and if you win. And it sounds like that's what happened with you. So tell us how that went.
Yeah. So, after everything happened, when I got my kids returned and we were set free, and we, booked it out of there as fast as we could out of that county. My lawyers still weren't satisfied with how it all went down, because CPS wouldn't take the allegations off my record, things like that. They were really, really dissatisfied with how it all worked out. And they really wanted to try to help to make sure that this kind of thing didn't happen again. I specifically felt like this happened to us because I was going to be given an opportunity to do something about it and help protect other families. So when my lawyers came back and said, hey, we'd like to file a lawsuit on your behalf. We don't know what the grounds are yet. We can do all the research, but are you down for doing that? It's going to be a lot. And I was like, absolutely. I knew that's what I was made for in that situation, was to be able to do that. And so they combed through all the medical records, found, and the CPS workers' notes and records and whatnot, found a note where she had said that the doctors told her that my daughter was fine the day of her being brought to the hospital, that she was fine and that she could leave. She had written that down in her notes, but then in the document that she submitted to the court, she told them that my daughter was in a medical condition that required her to be in the hospital. So we were able to use that as grounds to sue them for the trauma that was inflicted on our family during that time and the resulting trauma afterwards.
And I think you said $700,000 is what you want?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Our case won $700,000.
Yeah, the kind of funny part again here is that $700,000 doesn't actually come from those people. It comes from other people paying tax.
Right. The irony.
Yeah. And I'll bet that person probably didn't even lose their job. Maybe but I'll bet they didn't.
Yeah. So what happened was, when we first decided to sue them, I was like, yes, let's sue them. Let's make them never be able to do this to other people. And they're like, well, so this is how much money. And I'm like, I'm not talking about the money. I want them to not do this to other people. And they're like, well, the way you do that is you make them pay a lot of money so that they never want to pay that amount of money again. And so they don't do it. And I'm like, okay, fine, I'll take the money. So that's how we ended up suing them. We did find out through, because my lawyers, did depositions and whatnot with them. And that caseworker did actually end up losing her job with CPS. They suspected during our case, when my kids were taken, after the court date, when I was able to actually talk, and the caseworker was arguing with every single thing that I said to their county council. They suspected that she had some kind of vendetta against me. They took her off my case, but they still didn't return my kids to me. They just gave me a different caseworker because they already had my kids. So She did end up losing her job with CPS, and she went to work for Adult Protective Services. And I'm really hoping that once our lawsuit was complete, that she can go work at Walmart. She can go be a Walmart greeter. She doesn't need to have any power over people.
She should get some therapy and because obviously this person is super screwed up. I think we've all met some. I'll just say it, like women in our lives. Sometimes maybe they're on PMS, maybe or whatever it is, right? But they're kind of like they just have this vendetta, vindictiveness to you. But if it's just in regular life, you're just like fuck off or whatever, right? But when it's a government person, oh my God, you can that's the power with the problem with all this power that they give people through the government is, people like that who would normally just be this irritating, vindictive bitch that you'd be just like, fuck off, causes you major trauma and major problems for a long time.
Yep, absolutely. We had another caseworker that we worked with before her that got us, that understood us, that really respected the way that I parented. He really, really, got us. When we went to the team decision planning meeting, he told them, I don't need parenting classes, that I don't, that homeschooling was a strength for our family, like all of these things. And this caseworker just didn't get us. And that's the thing is, when CPS shows up at your door, you never know what caseworker you're going to get, and then that caseworker has way too much power over your life. And that was, what really, one of the biggest things that I took away from this whole experience was this, this like deep knowing that I am the only person that is the authority over my life. I'm the only one that gets to decide what's right for me and my family or not.
Yeah. What's shocking to me is that when they do this and you have this sort of court thing, they don't even talk to the parents. Like, I would never work as a government judge or anything like that. But let's just say I happen to have this job and someone comes in and goes, okay, we're going to take these kids from their parents and give them to someone else. I'd be like, well, can I talk to the parents? Like, what happened here? Like, that's just so unbelievable. Like, that they won't even talk to the parents. Like, that'd be the first thing I would do. I'd say, well, I'd like to talk to the kids and I'd like to talk to the parents. Let's just see what happened. And unbelievable, the entire system.
Bureaucracy is an absolute joke. I mean, there was so many things that happened during all of that. When your kids are taken from, you're supposed to be able to talk to them on the phone within 24 hours. that didn't happen.
Wow.
When my case got transferred over to a different caseworker, I contacted that caseworker multiple times and said, I want to, get together with you to talk about my case plan that it's voluntary. Well, no, it wasn't voluntary anymore. But this case plan that we're making, whatever, I want to be a part of designing it. I called him multiple times. He never got back to me. Then he submitted a case plan to the court and said that I'd been a part of designing it. Like all of these things that CPS can just do, and we don't have any say in at all. And they can just do it. And the courts and the bureaucracy and everybody's like, that's just how it's done. But you literally signed something saying that this was the truth, and it's not. But that doesn't matter because this is how it's done.
Crazy. I can't imagine what would happen if they tried to do that to me. I know pretty much there'd be a lot of violence. Trying to take my kids out of my house, my wife alone would be, machine gunning.
When the caseworker said that she was taking my kids screamed and ran over and were clinging to me, and we were crying, and I was begging her, and she wouldn't. And she said, if I didn't give them my kids right now, she was going to have that police officer arrest me. Unbelievable.
Well, I'm glad that you got through it all, and it kind of gives a few lessons out there for people as well. One is to make sure you have a good sort of community, for example, and you were lucky that you found this homeschooling one, but it's good to have a nice sort of like a social sort of safety net sort of thing. So, for example, I always like to say, make sure you have lots of friends all over the place. So if you have problems, they can all be there to help you, and luckily you found this homeschooling one that did. So that's, you're going to be speaking in Anarchapulco, and actually very curious to hear more about your homeschooling and your lifestyle. A lot of people are very into that sort of a thing. So you'll be there, and you'll be able to talk to lots of people, grow your network. So, if this happens to someone else, all of a sudden there's like 300 people all calling the sheriff, all down there with, signs and protesting and all that kind of stuff. Just kind of some things for people to think about out there. Like this could happen to you. Like, look how, it's another, I was in an airport in New Orleans, and I had a glass of wine, and the airport, the airline people had a problem with me bringing it on the plane. And they end up calling the sheriff, and, like in just a regular free market, maybe they just say, you just can't go on the flight. We don't like you for whatever reason. That'd be the end of it. But you get the sheriff involved. Now I'm in handcuffs. Now I'm in a jail. Now I need to call lawyers, just all this stuff. And you just, your I think it was your daughter was the one who had the diabetes. Is that right?
Yeah, my youngest
daughter.
Yeah,
so she had a health problem, which happens to a lot of people. You go to the hospital, and now you've got this horror that happens, and it can happen to anyone. So definitely make sure out there that you grow your network. And a great place for that is places like Anarchapulco, where you can meet like thousands of people who are like-minded. A lot of homeschooling. We're going to have a Free Your Family camp there. Are you bringing your kids down?
I am. Yeah.
Awesome.
They're going to be there with us. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to have lots of people bringing their kids down. So a lot of unschooled kids, homeschooled kids, and a lot of people just kind of like wanting to meet other people and see how they're doing it and get tips and advice and stuff like that. So really looking forward to see you down here in Acapulco in just a few weeks.
Me too. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me and giving me the opportunity to share a little bit of our story.
Yeah, my pleasure. And if you don't know Carlos Morales, do you know him?
Not personally, but I'm familiar with him, and I have his book, Legally Kidnapped. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. If you want to I can introduce you if you want. He's, he knows a lot of people who have been kind of fighting the CPS and all that. You'd be just another great person for them to know, and other people for you to meet and stuff like that.
Appreciate that. Thank
you.
For
sure. All right, so we'll leave it there. And Anarchapulco's coming up February 13th to 16th. A lot of great people. If you got kids, bring them down. That sort of a thing. Free Your Family camp, all kinds of stuff. And 4 full days of amazing speakers, all on the beach right here in Acapulco, Mexico. So Nova, it's been a pleasure. We'll leave it there, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks. And please like, subscribe, and share this video, especially with anyone who's had any problems with Child Protective Services. A lot of people probably aren't even aware just how bad they are. And some people might, this might be good information for them. So if you have anyone, even if you have anyone with kids in the U.S., you might want to share this with them so they are aware of what could happen to them and are aware of what some of the things that they can do to stop that. So please like, subscribe, share down below. And that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.
Anarchapulco, it's so hype, I'm trying to tell ya. This the event of the year and best vacation ever. Ron Potter, Jeffrey Tucker, just to name a few. Get your tickets, you don't wanna miss it. You should roll through. Talking politics to health and self-improvement to investing. So many things, not one thing. Learn how to live life unchained, yeah. 4 days vibing on the beach, time to connect. All about growth, way more than a conference. This is Anarchapulco, yeah. Let's go.
You ain't seen nothing yet.